The disappearance of Madeleine McCann from an apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal on 30 May 2007 became one of the most high-profile missing person cases in modern history. However, public and media focus quickly expanded beyond the search for the missing child to an intense scrutiny of her parents, Kate and Gerry McCann. The narrative of a straightforward abduction was challenged by what many perceived as contradictions in their behavior and questionable decisions, turning a tragedy into a complex web of public suspicion and competing theories. Central to the case are the actions of the McCanns, both experienced medical doctors from Rothley, Leicestershire. Their decision to leave their 3 young children, including 3-year-old Madeleine and her 2-year-old twin siblings, unsupervised in an unlocked ground-floor apartment while they dined at a tapas restaurant 55 meters away, has remained a focal point of debate. This prompts a critical question. How could 2 medical professionals, presumably with a heightened awareness of risk, contextualize such a decision? This choice is further complicated by a report that Madeleine had previously asked her parents, "Why didn't you come when me and Sean were crying?" suggesting a pre-existing vulnerability. While some argue that the repetition of this routine for nearly a week on holiday may have created a false sense of security, others question whether such a justification withstands scrutiny. Before we analyze the suspicions in the case, please let me know where you saw this video. I will read it all and spread it around the world. And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel to be the first to receive notifications when there are new videos. The unlocked patio door of apartment 5A, which the McCanns stated was left open for easier access during their intermittent checks, has been interpreted in starkly different ways. For some, it represents a grave act of negligence. For others, it is viewed as a potential element of a staged crime scene. This leads to a darker hypothesis, that Madeleine may have died from an accidental overdose of sedatives administered to help her sleep, and the open door was part of an elaborate narrative constructed to conceal the event. This theory is often connected to the fact that Kate McCann, as a medical professional, had access to injectable sedatives. It posits that the open door would not only support the story of an intruder, but also provide a discreet route to remove a body without leaving signs of forced entry. The parents' conduct in the immediate aftermath of Madeleine's discovery as missing also drew considerable analysis. Kate McCann's scream of abduction and Gerry McCann's reported collapse in tears were contrasted with subsequent actions that observers found puzzling. These include the decision to wash Madeleine's favorite soft toy, Cuddle Cat, and their refusal, on legal advice, to answer 48 questions from Portuguese police. Years later, British police cadaver dogs reportedly detected the scent of death on the Cuddle Cat toy, a finding that only deepened the mystery. While the washing of the toy was seen by many as a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence, could it also be interpreted as a distraught mother's instinct to clean a treasured object belonging to her child? Adding another layer of complexity were reports of tension within the McCanns' marriage, including allegations that Kate suspected Gerry of having an affair. This has led to speculation about whether emotional strain could have contributed to a lapse in judgment or, in a more sinister interpretation, provided a motive for creating a false narrative after a tragic accident. Their relaxed demeanor in the hours leading up to the alarm being raised has been viewed through 2 opposing lenses, as proof of their innocence and lack of foreboding, or as a calculated performance to conceal a pre-existing crisis. Ultimately, the case remains defined by these unresolved contradictions. Every detail, from the arrangement of the bedroom to the parents' emotional responses, has been scrutinized and debated. The open patio door, in particular, stands as a potent symbol of this ambiguity. Was it an innocent but catastrophic mistake made by parents on holiday, or was it the first calculated detail in a carefully constructed deception? Years later, public opinion remains sharply divided, leaving one to consider what single piece of evidence or behavior in this case is the most difficult to reconcile. The period during which Kate and Gerry McCann dined with friends at a tapas restaurant on the evening of 3rd of May 2007 remains one of the most intensely scrutinized episodes in the disappearance of their daughter Madeleine. Every decision made, every observed emotion, and every subsequent account of that time has been placed under a microscope, creating a narrative fraught with ambiguity. Depending on one's perspective, their actions were either those of tragically reckless parents or the calculated first steps in constructing an elaborate cover-up. The dinner itself, held at a restaurant approximately 55 meters from their ground-floor apartment, was framed by a series of choices that later attracted public debate. The McCanns opted against using the resort's readily available babysitting service, a decision some attribute to a desire for privacy, while others question if it was intended to prevent a third-party witness from being present in the apartment. Furthermore, a note in the restaurant's booking log requesting a specific table explicitly stated that the McCanns' children were sleeping alone in their room. Was this an act of naive transparency, or could it be interpreted as a calculated move to preemptively establish the apartment as a vulnerable target for an external intruder? Witnesses described the couple's demeanor at dinner as relaxed and cheerful. They were seen laughing and drinking wine. For many, this behavior is difficult to reconcile with the knowledge that their 3 young children were sleeping unsupervised in an unlocked apartment. While critics view this apparent lack of concern as profoundly negligent or even rehearsed, psychological interpretations suggest it could be a form of compartmentalization, a defense mechanism to separate oneself from a traumatic event in order to function. This raises a challenging question about human behavior under extreme stress. Can outward calm ever be taken at face value? The narrative of vigilance was further undermined by the physical reality of the resort's layout. The claim that they could monitor the apartment from their table was, at best, a form of self-deception, as the view was obstructed by trees and other buildings. The group's system of periodic checks also came into question, with later statements from the Tapas 7 group containing inconsistencies regarding the timing and thoroughness of these rounds. Perhaps the most pivotal and debated moment of the evening was Jerry McCann's check on the children at approximately 9:05 p.m. According to his statement, he entered the apartment and noticed the children's bedroom door was open wider than they had left it. Peering inside without turning on a light, he saw all 3 children apparently asleep in their beds. He did not approach them closely, nor did he check the window or shutters before pulling the door almost closed and returning to his friends. This apparent lack of thoroughness from a man trained in clinical observation, a cardiologist accustomed to noting minute details, has led many to question what he truly saw or didn't see in that brief moment. Given that the open door was an anomaly, why did a reportedly cautious father not conduct a more detailed inspection? This single event encapsulates the central mystery. Was it a fleeting, inconsequential glance into a peaceful room, or was it a moment that concealed a far more disturbing reality? Every action taken that evening, from the shared jokes at the dinner table to the casual check on the children, remains suspended between the possibility of innocence and the shadow of suspicion. The established timeline of Madeleine McCann's disappearance hinges on 2 critical but highly contentious moments of testimony, both of which have been scrutinized for their inconsistencies and alternative interpretations. The first is Jerry McCann's own account of checking on his children. His brief, dimly lit inspection of the bedroom is a narrative crossroads, branching into 2 profoundly different possibilities, one of critical parental negligence, the other of calculated deception. In the first scenario, his check was merely cursory. Assuming all was well, he did the bare minimum before returning to dinner, tragically failing to notice any signs of trouble. However, a more analytical interpretation posits that the check was a deliberate act to establish a false timeline. If Madeleine had already come to harm earlier in the evening, Jerry's claim to have seen her alive and sleeping would effectively anchor the narrative of her presence at that time, thereby shifting the window for a potential abduction to a later point and away from the period before the parents left for dinner. Several details lend weight to this more skeptical view. Jerry's failure to investigate the abnormality of the bedroom door being ajar, coupled with his professional training as a cardiologist accustomed to detailed observation, strikes many as incongruous. The discrepancy between his calm, sociable behavior upon returning to the dinner table and the potential gravity of an uninvestigated anomaly remains a point of intense psychological debate. Was this genuine composure or a demonstration of emotional control under immense pressure to protect a pre-planned story? Ultimately, if his sighting was a fabrication, it fundamentally alters the entire framework of the case. If he told the truth but was simply careless, it represents a heartbreaking failure of vigilance. Either way, his actions, or lack thereof, in that moment are pivotal. The second critical testimony came from Jane Tanner, a friend and member of the Tapas 7 group. She reported seeing a man carrying a small child in light-colored pajamas walking away from the McCann's apartment block. This observation, occurring just minutes after Jerry's check, seemed to provide powerful external corroboration for an abduction. Yet, the credibility of her account is severely undermined by one key fact. She failed to raise the alarm or mention this highly unusual sight until after Madeleine was known to be missing. This delay prompts serious questions about the nature of her testimony. Was her memory unconsciously shaped by the subsequent chaos and the emerging kidnapping narrative? It is also theorized that group dynamics and the pressure to be helpful in a crisis may have distorted her recollection. While investigators later concluded that the man she saw was likely an innocent tourist carrying his own sleeping child from a nearby creche, her initial testimony had already lent crucial early momentum to the abduction narrative, shaping public and police perception in the critical first hours of the investigation. Both of these key testimonies, therefore, exist in a state of paradox. While serving as the foundational pillars of the abduction timeline, they are simultaneously riddled with ambiguities that, for many, weaken the very story they are meant to support. The actions of two key members of the Tapas 7 group, Jane Tanner and Matthew Oldfield, have become central to the debate surrounding the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, as their testimonies represent critical moments that could have either clarified or complicated the timeline of events. Jane Tanner's reported sighting of a man carrying a child away from the apartment block has been intensely scrutinized, primarily due to her significant delay in reporting it. Psychologically, this inaction is perplexing. Was it a product of genuine uncertainty, or was her memory being subconsciously shaped by the rapidly forming abduction narrative within her social circle? Her testimony, though vivid, lacked any corroborating evidence. No other witnesses, no surveillance footage, and no physical proof supported her claim. The fact that investigators eventually dismissed the sighting, believing the individual to be another holidaymaker, reinforces doubts about its reliability. This leaves the enduring question of whether she was an unknowing participant in a spiral of panic or a more knowing contributor to a convenient story. Regardless of its veracity, her account played a crucial role. It introduced the image of a mysterious abductor at a pivotal moment, providing an external threat that perfectly complemented the timeline being established by Jerry McCann's earlier check. The haunting image of a barefoot child being carried into the night became a symbol of the case, but whether that image reflects a tragic reality or a masterful piece of misdirection remains unresolved. Similarly, Matthew Oldfield's check on the McCann children represents another critical yet ambiguous moment. Tasked with confirming the children's well-being, his inspection was notably superficial. He entered the apartment via the unlocked patio door, but admitted he did not turn on the light nor look closely enough to confirm if Madeleine was actually present in her bed. This cursory glance has been widely criticized as a significant failure, as it was the last opportunity to verify Madeleine's safety before Kate McCann would later raise the alarm. His inability to provide a clear recollection of the scene left a crucial gap in the timeline, making it impossible to know for certain if Madeleine was in the room at that point. Both of these accounts from trusted friends, which should have provided independent verification, instead added layers of confusion and doubt, leaving a lasting shadow over the investigation and continuing to shape the public's understanding of the night Madeleine McCann disappeared. The official narrative of Madeleine McCann's abduction is anchored by the moment of her discovery by her mother, Kate McCann. Yet this event is itself surrounded by deeply puzzling questions. Upon returning to the apartment, Kate reported finding the children's bedroom window open with the shutter raised and Madeleine gone. Her immediate reaction, running back to the tapas restaurant screaming the specific words, "They've taken her," has been a subject of intense analysis. To some, this was the instinctive cry of a terrified mother. To others, the phrase seemed too precise, a predetermined conclusion rather than a panicked question. This interpretation is compounded by her decision to leave her twin toddlers behind in the apartment as she ran for help, an action many find counterintuitive for a parent fearing an intruder. Was this a desperate rush to get help, or a choice made to maintain control of a carefully constructed narrative at its moment of inception? Coincidentally, around the same time, an independent sighting occurred that both supports and radically complicates the timeline. A British tourist, Martin Smith, saw a man walking hurriedly away from the vicinity of the resort, carrying a blonde, barefoot child in pajamas who appeared to be asleep or unconscious. The critical detail emerged weeks later. Mr. Smith reported that the man strongly resembled Jerry McCann, an identification that introduces a profound ambiguity. Does this sighting point to an unknown abductor, or does it suggest Jerry McCann was carrying his own daughter through the streets that night? This external testimony stands in stark contrast to the internal accounts from the McCann's friends. The check conducted by fellow diner Matthew Oldfield just before Kate's discovery is often cited as a moment of critical failure. His inspection was so superficial that he could not later confirm if Madeleine was even in her bed, nor could he recall the state of the window. This has led to speculation about his role. Was his cursory glance an innocent oversight influenced by a false sense of group security, or was it a more calculated act, perhaps unwitting complicity, to avoid discovering a truth that would disrupt the emerging timeline? His vague account conveniently helped to narrow the window for a potential abduction, but it also represents the final missed opportunity to verify the child's safety, leaving one of the most unsettling and pivotal moments of the case shrouded in doubt. One of the most persistent and unsettling theories surrounding the disappearance of Madeleine McCann diverges sharply from the narrative of abduction, suggesting instead that her death was accidental and followed by a meticulously orchestrated cover-up. This hypothesis is often rooted in the fact that Kate McCann, a medical professional, had access to injectable sedatives, with reports that some vials were found empty. It posits that a tragically miscalculated dose may have led to Madeleine's death, and the subsequent actions of her parents were not driven by a search for a kidnapper, but by a frantic effort to avoid legal consequences. In this context, Kate's now famous scream of "they've taken her" is re-examined not as a cry of raw anguish, but as the deliberate launch of a pre-planned narrative, timed for maximum emotional impact in a scene that notably lacked any physical evidence of a break-in. This counter-narrative is dramatically intensified by the Smith sighting, one of the few independent observations from outside the McCann's circle of friends. A tourist, Martin Smith, reported seeing a man strongly resembling Jerry McCann carrying a small, barefoot child in pajamas away from the resort area at almost the exact time Kate was raising the alarm. This testimony creates a chilling dichotomy. If accurate, it directly contradicts Jerry's alibi and suggests he was engaged in the act of concealing his daughter's body while his wife initiated the public search. This raises a crucial question about probability and timing. Can such a precise synchronicity of events be dismissed as mere coincidence? Further fueling this suspicion is the highly controversial 31-minute delay between the moment Madeleine was declared missing and the first official call to Portuguese police. During this critical window, members of the Tapas 7 group made 31 phone calls, none of which were to law enforcement. Critics find the decision to prioritize calls to family and friends in the UK over contacting local emergency services to be baffling and inconsistent with the behavior of genuinely panicked parents. Was this a chaotic response to trauma, or a controlled and strategic use of time? The delay is interpreted by some as a necessary interval to align stories among the group, ensuring a consistent timeline before authorities arrived. Alternatively, it could have provided Jerry McCann a crucial window to return from his alleged task, reintegrate himself with the group, and perform the role of a devastated father without raising logistical suspicions. The combination of a plausible motive, a compelling external sighting, and a deeply unusual delay in seeking official help has cemented a powerful and disturbing counter-narrative that continues to challenge the official account of what happened on the night Madeleine McCann vanished. Of course, here is the final text, rephrased into a single analytical piece that addresses the key themes and evidence presented in your provided content. The period immediately following the alarm over Madeleine McCann's disappearance is defined by a profound paradox: the contrast between the public display of parental anguish and a series of actions that have been intensely scrutinized as being inconsistent with genuine panic. Central to this is the highly controversial 31-minute delay in contacting Portuguese police. While supporters of Kate and Jerry McCann argue this gap can be attributed to the shock and confusion of being in a foreign country, critics find this explanation wanting, particularly for two medical professionals accustomed to making critical decisions under pressure. This period has become one of the most debated aspects of the case, raising a fundamental question. Does this missing half-hour represent the chaotic paralysis of trauma, or a calculated window of opportunity to align stories and compromise the crime scene before authorities could intervene? When a frantic, disorganized search finally began, it involved dozens of resort staff and guests, effectively contaminating any potential evidence within the apartment and its surroundings. The McCann's behavior during this search also drew conflicting interpretations. Kate's visible distress and Jerry's assumption of a leadership role were seen by many as the natural reactions of devastated parents. However, skeptics view this as a potential performance, a classic deflection tactic where perpetrators actively participate in the search for their victim to avert suspicion. This theory is bolstered by the Smith sighting. If Jerry McCann was indeed seen carrying a child away from the resort around 10:12 p.m., then the subsequent large-scale search was a futile exercise from its inception. A number of subsequent discoveries have cast a retroactive shadow over the events of that night, creating a compelling body of circumstantial evidence. Kate McCann's decision to wash Madeleine's treasured cuddle cat soft toy is considered highly suspect, especially as police cadaver dogs later alerted to the scent of death on it, suggesting a potential attempt to destroy forensic evidence. This, combined with the presence of empty sedative vials among their belongings, fuels the theory of an accidental overdose. Furthermore, a Renault Scenic hired by the McCanns weeks later became a focal point after cadaver dogs also alerted to the boot of the vehicle. While none of these elements offer definitive proof, their cumulative weight has created a powerful and enduring counter-narrative to the story of a random abduction, leaving the public to grapple with the unsettling questions that remain unanswered. The conduct of the initial police search prompts significant questions. It's reported that officers from the GNR, the local police force, lacked specific training for missing child investigations and failed to demonstrate the necessary urgency in securing the crime scene. Apartment 5A was not immediately sealed, allowing numerous guests and volunteers to move through it, thereby risking the contamination and loss of crucial evidence. One must consider, if tangible clues to Madeleine's fate, such as signs of a struggle, were present, could they have been irrevocably compromised within these critical first hours? This disorganized approach to the initial search arguably played into the hands of the McCanns, if one entertains the theory that they had something to conceal. The absence of immediate structural control, established forensic protocols, and seasoned investigative oversight resulted in the squandering of the most vital period of the investigation. Does this chaotic environment provide the ideal camouflage for a staged disappearance? From a psychological perspective, the apparent dichotomy between the McCanns' public displays of grief and their private actions has fueled persistent doubt. Were Kate's audible cries a genuine expression of a mother's anguish, or could they have stemmed from the immense pressure and guilt of a different reality? Similarly, was Jerry's composed leadership a source of reassurance for those around him? Or was it a calculated method to control the unfolding narrative? While behavior in moments of extreme trauma is acknowledged to be unpredictable, the seeming precision of their respective roles in those initial hours has remained a point of contention for both investigators and the public. How does one objectively interpret such contrasting behaviors in the face of tragedy? The emotional tableau of an entire community mobilizing to search through the night for a missing child is profoundly affecting, symbolizing hope and human solidarity. Yet what if that collective hope was founded upon a deception? The emotional toll of such a scenario would be immense, forcing us to confront the harrowing possibility that dozens of well-meaning individuals were unwittingly actors in a performance orchestrated by the parents themselves. As the search continued until the early hours, it yielded nothing. Madeleine had disappeared completely. There were no footprints, no discarded items of clothing, no clues left behind, only an atmosphere of confusion and quiet desperation. This initial period is characterized by a surface-level urgency that belies a deep undercurrent of uncertainty. It represents a complex intersection of genuine hope and potential deception, where every action could be interpreted in two starkly different ways. Were the McCanns desperately searching for their daughter, or were they searching for public credibility? The investigative and emotional repercussions of that night resonate even now. The investigation into Madeleine McCann's disappearance pivoted dramatically with the introduction of British specialist sniffer dogs. Eddie, a highly trained cadaver dog, and Keela, a blood detection dog, were brought to Praia da Luz, and their findings fundamentally challenged the McCann's account. Eddie, the cadaver dog, alerted to the scent of human decomposition in several highly specific and significant locations, behind the sofa and inside the wardrobe of apartment 5A, on an item of Kate McCann's clothing, on Madeleine's favorite soft toy, Cuddle Cat, and in the boot of a Renault Scenic hired by the McCanns weeks after her disappearance. Corroborating this, Keela, the blood detection dog, also indicated the presence of human blood in the same spot behind the sofa. Cumulatively, what do these alerts suggest? They paint a troubling picture, one less consistent with an abduction and more indicative of a death having occurred within the apartment. When confronted with these findings, Kate McCann offered an explanation for the cadaver scent on her clothes and the Cuddle Cat toy, attributing it to her profession as a general practitioner and the possibility of having come into contact with deceased patients. However, this explanation is challenged by a critical counter-argument raised by skeptics, including the dog handlers themselves. They noted that the dog's alerts were highly specific, occurring only in locations directly associated with Madeleine, rather than at random. The dogs did not give similar signals in other locations, such as other rental properties or vehicles used by the wider investigation team. Does this specific pattern of alerts not lend considerable weight to the theory that Madeleine may have died inside apartment 5A? The Renault Scenic, hired by the McCanns several weeks after Madeleine's disappearance, became a central point of forensic interest. The stated purpose of the hire was to assist in their search efforts, yet both specialist dogs alerted to the vehicle. More significantly, forensic analysis of the car's boot revealed a DNA sample which, although partial and complex, contained markers consistent with Madeleine's DNA. The Portuguese police considered this a powerful piece of evidence supporting the hypothesis that the car had been used to transport her body. However, the evidence is not unproblematic. The DNA sample was mixed and potentially degraded, and critics highlighted a major procedural flaw. The police themselves had driven the Renault Scenic to the forensic laboratory, introducing a clear risk of contamination. While this error significantly weakened the legal standing of the DNA evidence, it did not nullify its unsettling implications. It begs a fundamental question. Why would any trace of Madeleine's DNA be found in the boot of a vehicle hired so long after she vanished? The intrigue surrounding the car is deepened by its mileage records, showing it was driven over 3,000 kilometers in just 3 days, a distance Jerry and Kate attributed to their search, though the specifics of these journeys remain unclear. When considered together, the timing of the vehicle hire, the scent alerts, and the DNA finding, do these elements not create a compelling, albeit circumstantial, case that the Renault Scenic was used to transport Madeleine's remains? Based on this forensic evidence, several alternative theories emerged. One prominent hypothesis suggests that Madeleine died on the night of the 3rd of May, perhaps from an accident such as a fall or an overdose of a sedative given to help her sleep while her parents dined nearby. In this scenario, it is posited that the McCanns, in a state of panic, concealed her body temporarily, perhaps even in the local church they often attended. Then, weeks later, under increasing police scrutiny, they used the hired car to move the body to a more permanent location. This theory would account for the scent alerts in both the apartment and the vehicle. An alternative theory posits that the abduction narrative was a fabrication from the very beginning. In this interpretation, the details of the open window and Kate's immediate screams were elements of a pre-planned narrative designed to conceal an accidental death. From this viewpoint, the DNA in the car and the cadaver scent on personal items are not indicators of a malicious crime, but rather evidence of a cover-up born of fear and panic. Psychologically, Kate McCann's explanation for the cadaver scent can be perceived as an attempt to rationalize an incriminating discovery, an impression arguably solidified by her subsequent refusal to answer certain police questions. Jerry McCann, in contrast, maintained a cooperative public posture, yet seldom addressed the forensic findings head-on. Do their divergent responses suggest a coordinated strategy to deflect suspicion, or do they reflect a couple unable to confront an unbearable truth? On an emotional level, the scent alerts are profoundly disturbing. The idea that Cuddle Cat, the soft toy Madeleine reportedly cherished, could carry the scent of death transforms it from a symbol of childhood innocence into a piece of forensic evidence. This challenges our emotional response as much as our analytical reasoning. If we consider the possibility that Kate and Jerry handled their deceased daughter's body, the implications are staggering. What are we to make of such a scenario? Ultimately, the forensic findings in the McCann case occupy a contentious space. They are legally inconclusive, yet remain investigatively and emotionally compelling. They exist at the nexus of science and psychology. The cadaver dog's alerts were real. The DNA sample was real. Whether this body of evidence constitutes legal proof is a question for the courts. A different question, however, is whether it tells a coherent story. In the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, every clue, every scent, and every silence seems to communicate something significant. Madeleine Beth McCann, a 3-year-old girl, disappeared on the night of the 3rd of May, 2007. Her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, both medical doctors, presented the outward appearance of a stable, middle-class British family on holiday in Praia da Luz. However, reports suggest potential underlying tensions. It has been claimed that Kate McCann suspected her husband of infidelity, going so far as to purchase a recording device to monitor him. While rarely a focus of the main narrative, does this detail hint at a domestic dynamic that might have influenced the subsequent events? What was presented as a holiday took on a pattern that could be characterized as neglect. The McCanns routinely left their 3 young children sleeping alone in their ground-floor apartment, with a patio door left unlocked. A restaurant booking note even specified their desire for a table with a view of their apartment, explicitly acknowledging that the children were unsupervised. Was this simply a lapse in judgment, or could it be interpreted as a deliberate action to establish a narrative of easy access, thereby laying the groundwork for a subsequent claim of abduction? Upon discovering Madeleine was missing, Kate McCann's immediate reported cry was, "They've taken her." This statement asserts an abduction scenario before any evidence, such as forced entry, had been established. This immediate framing of the event, coupled with Jerry McCann's decision to ask a friend to contact the police while he reportedly made numerous private telephone calls, has raised further questions for analysts of the case. How should one interpret these initial reactions in the immediate aftermath of discovering a child is missing? The investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann is as much a study in public relations and political influence as it is a criminal inquiry. The case is defined by a deep and unsettling ambiguity, where the actions of her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, are viewed through two opposing lenses, one of unimaginable tragedy, the other of chilling premeditation. This dichotomy is evident in their behavior, from Jerry's composed and strategic media interviews to Kate's poignant tradition of buying birthday presents for her missing daughter, acts seen by supporters as signs of hope, but by critics as a calculated performance to maintain an image of innocence. This psychological puzzle is deepened by a series of actions that are difficult to reconcile with the narrative of a simple abduction, including Kate's refusal to answer 48 key questions from Portuguese police and the highly suspect decision to wash Madeleine's Cuddle Cat soft toy, on which cadaver dogs later detected the scent of death. The formal legal proceedings have only added to the confusion. The McCanns were officially named as formal suspects, arguidos, in 2007, largely due to forensic alerts and inconsistencies in their statements. Yet their suspect status was lifted less than a year later, citing insufficient evidence, a reversal that puzzled many and fueled speculation of political interference, particularly given the unprecedented involvement of the then British Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. Years later, the focus of the investigation abruptly shifted to Christian Bruckner, a convicted German sex offender with a criminal history in the Algarve. While plausible on paper, no direct forensic or witness evidence has ever linked him to the crime. This has led many to question if Bruckner is a genuine lead or a convenient scapegoat, introduced to breathe life into a cold case and permanently shift scrutiny away from the parents. This conflict has played out intensely in the public sphere, where social media became a battleground for competing narratives. While mainstream media often amplified messages of support, a significant online movement has persistently accused the McCanns of a cover-up, pointing to the mosaic of doubt created by their own actions. Their masterful use of media, including the swift launch of Madeleine's fund and curated interviews, is itself a point of contention. Was it a desperate effort to find their child, or a sophisticated campaign to build a protective wall of sympathy and control the public conversation? After nearly 2 decades, the case remains a haunting mystery, not for a lack of clues, but for an abundance of contradictions. The introduction of a new suspect has done little to provide closure, leaving the fundamental and unresolved question of what truly happened inside apartment 5A, buried beneath layers of masterful media spin, political influence, and time. Thanks for watching. How do you feel about these arguments and theories? Does it give you a different perspective on the case? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the latest notifications.